Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear participants. Welcome to this session of moral lessons from the Quran. We study various passages from the Quran every day in this holy month of Ramadan in order to remind ourselves of some of the basic moral issues which have been ingrained by the Almighty in ourselves. We have been discussing this at various occasions that as far as morality is concerned, this is ingrained in human nature. We don't need any external guidance to find out what morality is or what basic morality is. It is something which we were born with. When the Quran discusses basic morality, the purpose is generally to remind us of this lesson that we might keep on forgetting. So if you remember, we had started off a passage from Surah Bani Israil, which is the 17th surah of the Quran, and it is a Meccan surah. And we also know that it was revealed in the time when the Quraysh, especially, they were being told in very, very final terms, in a very conclusive way, that their time is now beginning to expire. They are denying out of sheer ignorance, out of sheer arrogance, and it will not be far when the Prophet will migrate from them, and the custodianship of both the houses of God will be assigned to him. This is something which is mentioned right at the beginning of Surah Bani Israil. So the part that we are studying, and I said that we will split up this passage into three portions. It deals actually with the commandments of the 10 commandments of the Quran, which are very similar, as I said yesterday, to the 10 commandments of the Torah or the Old Testament. We had studied some of these commandments. For example, we had studied the importance of the fact that there is only one God, and this is something which is ingrained in human nature, and therefore we have to worship Him only. And the second thing that we studied previously was that it is essential that once we owe this obligation, or once we fulfill this obligation with the Almighty, our next obligation lies towards our parents, and especially when they grow old in our presence. And of course, at that instance, or when they are old, they get irritable easily. And it is here that we have to show utmost patience and try our best to deal with them in a way. And remember that we were in a very similar situation when we were growing up, and we were helpless individuals placed in their laps, and they sacrificed and they showed tremendous patience to groom and rear us. And so this is a payback time in which, when parents grow old, younger children or mature children, they have to try to repay them as far as they can. So we now continue with this passage, and the next verses that we will study are from verses 26 to 32. So the Arabic words and their translation is something that I'm just going to read out before you. So it says, وآت ذا القربى حقه والمسكين وابن السبيل ولا تبذر تبذيرا إن المبذرين كانوا إخوان الشياطين وكان الشيطان لربه كفورا وإما تعرضن عنهم ابتغاء رحمة من ربك ترجوها فقل لهم قولا ميسورا ولا تجعل يدك مغلولة إلى عنق ولا تبسطها كل البسط فتقعد ملوما محسورا إن ربك يبسط الرزق لمن يشاء ويقدر إنه كان بعباده خبيرا بصيرا ولا تقتلوا أنفسكم خشية إملاق نحن نرزقهم وإياكم إن قتلهم كان خطأ كبيرا ولا تقربوا الزنا إنه كان فاحشة وساء سبيلا. And give to your near kin their due, and also the destitute and to the traveler. And do not squander your wealth wastefully, for the wasteful are Satan's brothers, and Satan is ever ungrateful to his Lord. And if you have to disregard those in need, because you are seeking God's bounty or your Lord's bounty of which you are waiting, then speak to them affectionately. And do not be miserly or prodigal, that as a result of it you should either earn reproach or be reduced to indigence. Indeed, your Lord gives abundantly to whom He pleases, and sparingly to whom He pleases. He is aware of his servants and is observing them. And do not kill your children for fear of poverty. We provide for them also and for you, because killing them is a heinous crime. And do not even go near adultery, because it is a blatant lewdness and a very evil path. So you see, the verses are continuing from the previous passage, in which it just ended. The previous passage ended on the fact that you have to show kindness and politeness towards your parents. Now, because of the fact that we do have extended family and, of course, other people who might be in need, so therefore, the verse immediately following it says, وَآتِ ذَا الْقُرْبَى حَقَّهُ وَالْمِسْكِينَ وَابْنَ السَّبِيلِ, that give to the near kin their due, and also the destitute and the traveler. So we need to understand in those times in Arabia, traveling was a big hassle, and people had to go through all sorts of hardships when they would travel from one city to another. And usually they were left at the mercy of the other people, or the people who would be living in the city that the person would be traveling to. So they would virtually be in need. But even before that, the words of the Quran are that you give to your kin your due. So besides your parents, which you have to respect a lot, don't forget your nearest kin. They could be your siblings, they could be your children, they could be your immediate relatives. Remember, if they are in need, then they are the most worthy recipients of what you can spend. So this is, of course, something which common sense and our own human nature so readily entails, that whenever someone amongst our relatives is in need, we have to first look after him or her. And instead of going and finding out other people, we have a special obligation towards our closest relatives. And this is something, my dear participants, that we have to be extremely careful of, because many a time there are people around us who are closely related to us, who are in extreme need, but their apparent self-esteem and, of course, their apparent looks at times is so misleading that we tend to think that, well, this person is well off and he or she would not be needing anything. Whereas we do know that self-esteem is something, and of course, at the same time, a person's forbearance and a person's austere habits at times give this misleading information to people around them, unless, of course, they deeply look around them and they see that the person who might be posing to be someone who is pretty okay with his expenses or her expenses, but a little more evaluation and assessment would show us that, well, the very person who might be looking in such a situation that you would think that he or she would not require anything, well, this is not the case. So especially we have to take care of our relatives. Very extremely, it is important to not just wait for them to come to you, but in fact, it is essential that we reach out to them. And it is always difficult for people who have self-esteem that they will ever come and ask for anything. So it is a responsibility that every one of us has, who has been blessed by affluence and wealth, to go and find out such people amongst our relatives. And not only our relatives, but the destitute, the masakeen, people who are afraid at times to ask. And there are people, of course, who do ask, but then especially people who withhold and are simply they don't have the courage to ask because they have a very strong self-esteem. So such people, the Almighty says that you have to give their due. Don't forget, don't just think about your own selves. You have to think beyond yourselves as well. Well, this doesn't mean that thinking about our own selves is something which is incorrect. Obviously, we are in an obligation. We owe this obligation to our nearest of kin, for example, our own family. But we have to extend that beyond that family, so that our immediate family and people who might come in our contact, they could be our colleagues, our friends, people who work at our workplaces, all of them, they have a right that we have to discharge. And at one place, the Quran has very, very it's such a beautiful thing that it is said that even people who travel along with you, who might be sitting on the very next seat, you might even not know them. They are unknown to you, but you're traveling with them, maybe in a bus or in a train or in an aeroplane. and somehow you get to know that there is something that they require. Even those people, they have a right on us. So it says, Sahib will jump. People who accompany you, you are not aware of them, you don't have any acquaintance with them, and somehow you get acquainted with them during the journey. Even they have a right on you. So such is this compassion and mercy and this sympathy which the Quran wants us to always be in a position that any carelessness in this regard should not happen at all. And then, of course, the verses continue in a very similar vein. And the next thing it says is, they say, is that وَلَا تُبَذِّرْ تَبْذِيرًا إِنَّ الْمُبَذِّرِينَ كَانُوا إِخْوَانَ الشَّيَاطِينِ وَكَانَ الشَّيْطَانُ لِرَبِّهِ كَفُورًا. And do not squander your wealth wastefully, for the wasteful are Satan's brothers, and Satan is ever ungrateful to his Lord. So you see, what makes us stop spending on others, or which makes us so selfish, is that we are extravagant in our spending. We squander wealth. At times we squander wealth by overspending, and we squander wealth by spending in areas on heads which are absolutely uncalled for. So extravagance and squandering wealth is something which stops us from thinking about others. And the Quran says the people who do this are Satan's brothers, because Satan is someone who will always call you, as at other places it has been mentioned, he will strike fear in you, and he will say that, well, if you start spending on others, you will end up as a poor and a pauper person, a poor person or a pauper. So please save yourself some money and keep spending on your own self. So this is how Satan attacks you. He makes you fearful of any poverty that might come to your way if you keep on spending. So squandering one's wealth without realizing that our needs, of course, have been easily met. Okay, one can go a little beyond one's needs, but then going far beyond one's needs is something that makes us so selfish that we are unable to take account of the society around us. And this is something which the Almighty dislikes. And of course, all of us who have compassion and sympathy, we would also not agree with such an attitude that a person starts to gather scores and scores and hundreds of dresses and shoes or various things, and it would always be the case and that years pass before you even turn to some clothes or some shoes or some handbags maybe, or some other useful things that you might have bought, because you have so much that the turn of something which you had bought earlier on never comes so soon. So this is a point of caution, and it tells us that such a behavior leads us away from the needs of others. And then the right attitude is actually mentioned here. And it is said that if you have to disregard those in need because you are seeking your Lord's bounty, of which you are waiting, then speak to them affectionately. Because at times there are people who come to you and they require help, and you yourselves also are not in a position to help, and you're still praying to the Almighty, you're seeking His forgiveness, and you're seeking His bounty. Then the Quran says that at least people who come to you to ask for their needs, be polite to them. If you have to refuse, affectionately refuse. Have a smile on your face. Make the other person realize that you had tried your best, and at the moment your pockets are empty, and you are very, very embarrassed at this. The feeling which should go to the other person is not the fact that you start scolding him, or at times ticking him off or her off, and telling him that you're asking for help every now and then. Instead of that, what we are told is that if we are not in a position to help people, then at least we have to speak to them in very affectionate terms, because again, if we do not do so, this damages the self-esteem of the person. It is something which is unbearable. The biggest thing which a person has is self-respect. And if that is damaged or compromised in any way, we can only imagine what happens or goes through the mind of our own person. And if we get that experience ourselves, perhaps sometime, we do imagine how horrible that experience is. And may God save us from this experience, and may God make us realize also that we have to be careful in this matter as well. And the right way suggested here in the Quran is that وَلَا تَجْعَلْ يَدَكَ مَغْلُولَةً عَلَىٰ عُنُقِكَ وَلَا تَبْسُطْهَا كُلَّ الْبَسْطِ فَتَقْعُدَ مَلُومًا مَحْسُورًا, which means that we should neither be miserly nor prodigal. You should be, and this should be the case that, I mean, you have to be in a way that you are absolutely moderate. And do remember that as far as one's sustenance is concerned, one's livelihood is concerned, Inna rabbaka yabsutu rizqa liman yasha'u wa yaqdir. It is God who controls our livelihood. To some he gives scantily, and to others he gives moderately or abundantly. So we have to realize that the right way in spending is spending in moderation. So to be miserly or to be prodigal, I mean, either you keep on spending so that whenever the need arises, you feel ashamed, or you are so miserly that you end up blameworthy when that such a person had the amount and the resources to spend on others. Because of that miserly attitude, because of stinginess, he or she never thought about other people. So we have to stay in between, neither miserly nor prodigal. And this is a lesson that we have to learn. And this also shows that saving money for the sake of use, not only for ourselves but for other people, is something which the Quran does not at all condemn. Because as far as saving money is concerned, not only for our own future but also for the future of other people who might come and ask for us, is something which is recommended by the Quran. But the bottom line is that in such cases we have to neither be miserly nor we should be people who should start overspending. And then we are reaching the end of this passage, or this part of, or these part of the verses, which says, وَلَا تَقْتُلُوا أَوْلَادَكُمْ خَشْيَةَ إِمْلَاقٍ نَحْنُ نَرْزُقُهُمْ وَإِيَّاكُمْ إِنَّ قَتْلَهُمْ كَانَ خِطْئًا كَبِيرًا. We know that this was a heinous and horrible practice in Arabia of those times, in which children would be killed, infant children, especially girls, thinking that they are not earning hands and they would become a burden on the family. They would be killed. And the reason for that killing, which the verse mentions, is that you think that you'll not be able to financially support them. So it's like it's something unthinkable. The Almighty says that, what do you think? What do you think you're doing? If you are killing someone, remember, it's not you who is going to provide for the child that you are now putting to death. Your own livelihood, your own resources are also something which God provides. So nahnu narzuqukum wa iyyakum. God says it is we who provide you with sustenance, and it is we who will provide them with sustenance. Who are you to take the life of young children? This is a practice we know which was rampant in ancient Arabia, and we just shudder even at the thought of it. And it makes us, realize that how far an animal can people become when they start thinking of their own children to be financial burdens on themselves. And then the verse, this passage actually finishes with this very important directive: وَلَا تَقْرَبُوا الزِّنَا إِنَّهُ كَانَ فَاحِشًا وَسَاءَ سَبِيلًا. That do not even go near adultery, because it is a blatant lewdness and a very evil path. So you see, the basis of the society, of a healthy society, is the unit of the family. A family unit can only flourish if the husband and wife are devoted to one another. And adultery is something which is directly opposite to the institution of the marriage. It damages very badly the institution of marriage. Extramarital relations, they play havoc with this institution. This institution of marriage actually protects not only the chastity and modesty of the husband and wife, it also goes a long way in protecting the next generation by grooming them in a way that both the husband and wife, they are present for him, for the young child, whether she's a boy or a girl, in such a way that they are dedicated to one another. They are sincere to one another. They are faithful to one another. So if anything which is contrary to that, then it has to be abstained for. So la taqrabu zina would mean that it doesn't mean that you don't commit adultery. It means that don't even go near adultery, which means that things which might lead us to adultery, which might instigate us, which might lure us to this heinous practice, they must also be avoided. So with these words, I end my talk here, and now I'm available for any of the questions that you might have.
Thank you, Dr. Shehzad. Rajni, you have the first question. You may go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum, sir.
Walaikum assalam.
My question is, if Allah is the provider of sustenance, then why do people die of starvation?
No, these are two separate things. When it is said that God is the provider of sustenance, it means that the source of sustenance is God, not any of the deities which people worship, not anyone else. He is the one who provides. But then at the same time, what happens is that when He provides sustenance, He has put people through a life of trial and test. So at times He restricts their sustenance, He constricts them. At times what happens is that He gives them abundantly. And at times it is the misuse of or misplanning of human beings which results in a shortage of food, and famine and pestilence and such things result more often than not because of God's planning, but because of misplanning by human beings themselves. So what is said on the one hand is that sustenance is something which God provides, no one else. So it's like negating any other source of that sustenance. It's not that you go to some other person or some other deity, because you see what happened in Arabia was that they used to ask for sustenance from other deities as well. And the Quran expressly prohibits this and says that if you have to ask for sustenance, its source is God. No one else provides you with sustenance. It's a big misconception. But on the other hand, this sustenance itself is governed by the rule of trial, in which, of course, as I said, people are tried and tested. Sometimes this trial is from God, and sometimes this trial is from the misuse of authority and power by human beings themselves.
Okay, sir. That means if we take responsibility very well, like giving zakat or fitra something, then it will be, then the people will not die of starvation. If we do
No,
our responsibility.
No, this is not a guarantee. You see, what this will entail is that as far as our own planning is concerned, we can say that it was not our fault. But you see, what happens is there are certain calamities which cannot be controlled by human beings. For example, if you have floods, for example, if you have earthquakes, you have other natural calamities which cause deficiency in food supplies. So these are trials which come from God. So what I said is that there are some trials which do come from God, and there are other trials which are created by the misappropriation, I would say, or the misuse of one's power, authority, or planning. So these are two entirely different things. It's not always the fault of a human being which results in these trials. As I said, natural calamities, which of course are God sent, they also result in lack of sustenance. And remember, as I said earlier on, that this is one form of trial and test which the Almighty has subjected mankind to ever since it has come into being, because He has stated in the Quran that the purpose of creating mankind, or to make them understand that why they have been brought into existence, is to test and try their mettle, whether they remain thankful in situations which are adverse to them or not.
Thank you. Fatma, you are next.
Assalamu alaikum. My question is that if one of the parents is into the habit of backbiting, like whenever you sit with them, they start backbiting, and you want to communicate to them that you don't want to be a part of this act, how can you communicate this thing without disrespecting them and without making them feel judged?
I think one of the probably the easiest way, and perhaps a little difficult way, is that you just talk to them very frankly and very directly and very politely, and tell one of the parents that you experience are doing this thing that please, I would not like to be a part of this discussion, and kindly excuse me, because I think it is against what God has told us. So if you start saying such words or backbiting, please don't regard it to be disrespectful. I might just get up from this, from our gathering or our meeting, or if we are in the same room, and just go away, because I think this is something which is against what God has said. And do repeatedly say that, please don't take it as disrespect. I respect you, but at the same time, I do think that backbiting is something that you should avoid. And at other times, if this is not possible, then at least you should stay silent and not contribute in any way to the other person's the way he or she would be speaking. So I think it's a question of strategy, which might vary from situation to situation, case to case. At times, silence. At times, leaving the place. At times, even talking directly. Because if you are talking to someone who is close to your heart, and you talk to them in a way in which you show your immense concern and tell us that, look, we have to be God-fearing individuals, and if we say these words, it would be an offense which not only the God has prohibited, but also it would be defaming the person who is not present. So at times, such a conversation helps. So you just need to evaluate the situation and behave accordingly.
Thank you, Adil Qureshi. You're next now. You can ask a question.
GCIL.
Walaikum assalam.
So, Dr. where it says that you should not kill your children from the fear of not having enough sustenance for them. Clearly, the reason why people do the family planning is the fact that they fear that they won't be able to provide for the child. Does that imply that one should not do family planning?
Well, this verse has nothing to do with family planning at all. It was never the purport of the Quran, nor has it ever was meant in this way, that the child that you plan and he or she has been conceived, and you if you want to abort that child, and the reason for aborting that child is poverty, then this verse stops us from that. No, this is absolutely a different. The verse has a different connotation. The verse speaks about children who are born, who have been born, who have come into existence. And this was a practice in the times of Arabia, which has been mentioned in the Quran at other places, of course, in history as well, that they would kill their children once they would be born, especially their girls. So it is talking about that. As far as family planning is concerned, this is an entirely different matter. It is not even discussed in the Quran anyway directly. In fact, what has been discussed directly regarding family planning is that you have to use your own common sense in planning a family, because when you do so, just consider the amount of time that you have for that child, whether your wife is in a position to nurture that child, whether her health is in the right situation. So while giving an example in Surah Waqia regarding the cultivation of land, this is presented as a parable, and we are told that, look, what you do is you plan, and then you cultivate your land. I do remember that the ultimate produce is the result of God's planning. So the planning for your own future, planning in concordance and in commensurate to the time that you have, the effort that you can take out, because you see, it's not just like producing children. You have other obligations also once they are born, whether the time that you can give is sufficient or not. Even if you think that, well, you are a person who has limited resources, and you would like to spend those limited resources on a few children so that you can give them the best of education. This is not at all equivalent to the fact that you are killing someone who is not even born as yet. So I think this is a question of misplacing this verse, and it has nothing to do with family planning, in my humble opinion, at all.
Thank you. Dr. Surya, you can ask your question now.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Shehzad. Thank you very much for reading out another beautiful ayat for us. My question is actually a question that's been asked on one of your groups today. Is about the whole story of the issue between Hazrat Ismail and Hazrat Hajra, carrying him on his shoulders, about the Zamzam story. Now we know about the Farahi school of thought on this, and you have done a very good piece of work on that in your PDF document and some of your videos. You have established a very beautiful timeline from Quran, and if read properly, that timeline contradicts or stands against any claims that have been made in the face of Hazrat Hajra running between Safa and Marwa, with the child stroke teenager on her shoulders. Now the same story is actually told in Genesis as well, except for the difference is Quran never claims that she did that. Quran establishes the timeline but never claimed that she did that, but Genesis does. Genesis claims that this event actually took place. So there are many contradictory, confusing narratives in Genesis, because Genesis also establishes a timeline. So first it establishes a timeline, then it contradicts itself. Now I'm aware of the Farai school of thought regarding what the reason for Sa'i is. Ghamidi Sahab talks about it's about the Qurbani that Hazrat Ibrahim allegedly did when he was asked to do the Qurbani, although Quran never mentions the name of the child. We presume it was Ismail. So I have two questions. A, in the timeline that we have already established about the age of Ismail and Isaac, where does the event of Qurbani fits in? And B, when was the event of Sa'i actually introduced for us as a part or integral part of Hajj and Umrah? When did actually, if it is not true that it was a prophetic tradition, then when was it actually introduced and why?
As far as your second question is concerned, I think I have done my research in detail and presented my arguments and shown that how from the very passage of the Quran and from some passages of the Bible itself, it shows how clearly Ishmael was about 14 or 15 years of age at that time. And then I've also shown that as far as this Sa'i is concerned, it is in an ancient custom in which whenever an animal would be sacrificed, he would not only be made to pass through or circulate the place of sacrifice, he would also be made to pass at the place he would be sacrificed, and it was called the rounds of vow. So it was like a vow or a nazar which would be made, and before sacrificing that animal, not only the actual place where it was to be brought was somewhere where it was made to walk, but right at the place where that sacrifice was to be made. So because we know that it was at the hillock of Marwa that this sacrifice took place, so it was between Marwa and Safa that this whole exercise is done. It has nothing to do with what happened with Hagar or Hajra, because that is something which never actually happened. It is actually a symbolic expression of the fact that this was the place where Abraham had actually intended to sacrifice Ishmael. And in accordance with the ancient Arab tradition, in which before you sacrifice that animal at a place, you make it circulate or make it go around that place. So basically, this Sa'i is a remnant of that particular practice. It has nothing to do with what Hagar did, as I said, because that is something which never happened.
Yes, yeah, that's true. I fully understand all that. But my question is, the Sa'i, the incident that you just quoted, the ritual for the sacrifice for the animal to go around, that's also actually come from a biblical source. My question is that how is this then introduced in our practice of Hajj and pilgrimage? Hajj and Umrah. How and when it become a part or an integral part of our ritual?
Right at the time of Abraham, when he was called upon to do Hajj, just after the incident of sacrifice, when the house of Abraham had been built and Ishmael and Abraham had built the holy Kaaba. So this was part of the rites of which we call the manasik. The manasik of Hajj included the tawaf, it included the sa'i, it included some of the other things that we do, like a haircut and etc. So it was introduced right at the time of Hajj, which was precisely what was introduced when Abraham had built. Actually, it was rebuilt. The Kaaba was already there, so he and Ishmael, they had rebuilt the Kaaba on its original foundations. And then, as Surah Hajj says, وَأَذِّن بِالنَّاسِ فِي الْحَجِّ, that now you proclaim to the rest of mankind to come and visit this house and do its pilgrimage. So it was at that time that, like all other worship rituals, like tawaf and like the istilam, for example, Sa'i was introduced right at that time.
And our Prophet actually verified this, as he promoted this as a sunnah, and he verified it, and he wanted us to carry on with this.
Not only our Prophet, but all prophets after Abraham. So we do have this with this tradition that even the Prophet, it is mentioned that the Prophet David actually made an effort to come there and do this, and some of the other prophets are also mentioned. And you might consider reading Abdul Sattar Ghori, one of the very learned scholars of Al-Mawrid, who passed away some years ago, who actually showed from history that how other prophets of the Israelites, they tried to do this pilgrimage.
Mr. Khwaja, you can have your question now.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Sahab.
Walaikum assalam.
It's not so much a question, it's more like my thoughts on the zakat and khairat,
Right.
which I was not following, and I'm trying to follow. There's a quotation that don't give the poor the fish, give him a fishing rod.
Mm-hmm.
So what our attitude towards distributing zakat and khairat is to just get rid of money. Oh, I have to pay this much and I don't care where I throw it. So normally we end up giving to people who are not deserving, or they're professional beggars. So I now take care to ensure that money I'm distributing is going to the right person and in right circumstances. Also, I see that if I can invest money in his business, for example, if he's doing poorly in the shop he has or some other thing, give him some investment, invest in his business so he can, it's a long-term investment in his business and he can get on his own feet. That is one of my thoughts. And then the other thing is some of my family prefers to give to big organizations like zakat and khairat, to big organizations. And I always question that what percentage of this money that we give to them it goes to the real needy person, and how much of it is spent on the administrative expenses. So I think you can give me some thoughts on that.
So I think when zakat is established, or the system of zakat is established in its ideal form, we must remember that it has to be given to the state. And the state is responsible for balancing out all these payments, not only to organizations, but to individuals and to various other heads, like, for example, schools and building hospitals and roads and all sorts of things which are for public welfare. So you see, at the moment we are functioning under a dysfunctional system of zakat, in which we ourselves are required to pick and choose where we would like to spend. And therefore, at times, we do make mistakes, and at times, as you said, it's difficult to track down whether a person is a really deserving person, because many of the people who ask are beggars and they are professional beggars. So this is a situation that we are facing because of this dysfunctional system. Otherwise, what has been Islamically recommended is that the zakat has to be collected by the state, and the state will now balance out, and of course it has the machinery to find out who exactly and where exactly this money would be best utilized. But because of the fact that this does not exist, all that I can suggest is that, to the best of your ability, wherever you think that at times it could be individuals who could be needy, by investigating their personal circumstances, at times you will find that there are institutes, for example, who cater for the needy, and there are some very extremely good institutes all over the world which are doing a tremendous job in helping out people, because they have more reach. They have more people that are really deserving, whom they have really vetted as well. So maybe at times it is good that when you're not in a position to find such a person, then since they are doing it, you're helping them on. So I think this is a choice that you need to make there's no rule of thumb. It's a choice that you need to make, keeping in view the circumstances that you are in, the country that you're living in, the society that you're living in, and just hope for the best that whatever you're doing is going to land in really worthy individuals and for worthy causes.
Rafia, you can have your question now.
Dr. Shehzad, I wanted to ask you that when we are born, God has put in our conscience right and wrong. And as we grow, we learn it even more and more. What really puzzles me is what happens to the people when they grow up, what we see, whether it's our politicians, whether it's our businessmen. Corruption starts. We were waiting for the state of Medina. Where is that? And suddenly all the wrongdoings of everyone suddenly comes up. So what bothers me is that maybe I'm not understanding what has happened to our fitrat. Where is the conscience gone? Businessmen are making money corruptly. Politicians are corrupt. Shopkeepers are corrupt. Where are we going wrong? We have the conscience, don't we?
I think the pace that we are going wrong is that we are thinking more about what other people are doing wrong and less about what we are doing wrong. And this has become a tradition and a habit that we keep thinking how other people are corrupt, and how they are looting the society and not doing what they should do. So I think that must change this attitude drastically, and always keep on thinking what I have done and I'm not doing, and what I am doing wrong and I should mend myself. Because you see, self-analysis will show that it's easy to criticize, but it will also show that some of the blatant things which others were doing, we are maybe doing some less, because our sphere might change, the form may change, but some of the harms that we are inflicting, not only, it's not just the question of good governance, it is also the question of our attitude towards the Almighty, towards our husbands and wives, our siblings, our parents, our children, to the society at large, to people whom we can influence with. So I think everything must, we must revisit this. And for this, I would like you to especially quote you to one of the outstanding personalities of recent times who have just passed away. His name was Maulana Wahiduddin Khan. And he has made this tremendous contribution. He has always come up with this strong suggestion that forget about what other people are doing, because at the end of the day you might not be able to even mend their ways, and it's like venting your own frustration. Always keep thinking that what you can do and what you must do and what you are not doing, in spite of the fact that you can do.
But Dr. Shehzad, what about our rulers? When you see in front of your eyes what is happening, and don't you feel that you need, that there is some way you can understand what is happening to them? You try for yourself the best. I try to do the best to make sure I don't do anything wrong, but I can't stop seeing what is happening in my country.
Of course, what I'm saying is that there are things that you cannot help. If there are people who are doing something wrong, I cannot do anything except feel very disappointed and frustrated, and make people realize that such a person or such a politician is someone who's not worthy of our vote. But that is all that we can do, because you see, in the power politics that ensue in most of our third world countries, because of many factors, it doesn't translate. Our own frustration does not translate into the other person regarding whom we are very disappointed with, that he would change. That's seldom the case. I think we have to direct our efforts towards the next generation who are going to replace current rulers. So therefore, a system of education, a system of tarbiyah, and other than that, thinking about our own nieces, our own children, and our own grandchildren, how we can influence them. Even if we have just 5 or 10 people under our influence, if we make a mission of trying to make them understand their responsibilities and duties, I think our job would be, done. We would feel satisfied. I'm not saying that this doesn't make us feel bad about what our rulers are doing. All that I'm saying is that our negative energy should be channelized towards positive activities. Otherwise, what we can do is just listen to talk shows every night endlessly and give our expert opinions, which of course don't matter, and then just go to sleep and start the cycle the next day. So it's like a useless exercise. I would dare say. I think we should have to be productive and always concentrate on our part of the job.
Dr. Shehzad, I do a lot of introspection. I do keep thinking about myself, but I still can't help thinking of the society and wishing I could do something. That is the thing. It's not that I don't think what's wrong or right I'm doing. I do think that a lot.
But I can wish you the best of luck, because that is only the way out, I would say.
Thank you so much.
Shehzad, I have a written question. If someone is raped and they get pregnant, could they get abortion?
Absolutely. And regarding abortion, we should know that it should be done before 120 days, because before 120 days, the conceived fetus is not a human being, it's just an organic mass. Because we know from the Quran and also from the Hadith literature that it is after 120 days that the spirit or the soul is blown into it and it becomes a human being, so to speak. Other than that, it's a organic mass without any soul in it. So if a lady is, she's raped, unfortunately, then if she wishes to abort the child within as soon as possible, this is something that, of course, she can do. This is something, if you talk about Muslims, you see the Roman Catholic Church has taken an extreme different stance, and they don't recommend any sort of abortion, because to them, once life forms, whether it is with the soul or without the soul, abortion to them is tantamount to killing the child. But this is not, at least the Islamic understanding. All our jurists are unanimous in this, that before 120 days, for any valid reason, a fetus can be aborted.
Okay. You said with any valid reason or without any valid reason?
But anyway, whenever a person aborts, there is a reason. The reason could vary from person to person. Seldom is there any invalid reason. For example, even if you think that you have conceived, you already have a lot of children, maybe 3 or 4, and it was an accidental conception, that too is a valid reason, because that would mean that you are not in a position to raise another child, or the mother or the father is not in a position. So all these things, they form valid reasons. So within the first 120 days, any abortion can take place.
There's another question. Is it necessary to do iqama when we offer fard prayers at home, or is it necessary only when we perform prayers at masjid? Is there a reference to guide this?
This is just to be done in congregation. So if you are offering at home and the prayer is in congregation, for example, there are other individuals at home, then yes, iqama has to be said. But if you are totally alone, because at times you're alone, not only at your home, but even at the mosque, because at times the congregation prayer has passed. So iqama is something which is only done when there are people to be called for iqama, and this is of course only when either you're praying in congregation at the mosque or having a congregation at your home.
Okay, should the beggars who apparently have begging as a profession, should they be paid or should they be turned down?
Well, it's a personal, decision. But if you ask me, I generally discourage this, because you see, professional beggary is something which makes the money not reach the actual deserving people. And because of the fact that these professional beggars, they pose as individuals, they have their arms and legs intentionally broken. There are gangs of such people who make them look in a way that they would catch the sympathy of people, and they inflict all sorts of diseases on them just to earn money. And they are these gangs who do this. So I would, on most occasions, I would say that we should refrain from that. But then at times it is a very difficult decision when an old man knocks at the door of your car, or when a very young boy or a child who is, badly dressed, or maybe not even having a shoe on. So it's a difficult decision. But I think generally professional beggary must be thoroughly discouraged. And by the way, it is the responsibility of a state to cater for all these individuals who are not able to earn from themselves. But since the state is not that responsible on most occasions, so I would say that it's a personal choice, and it's difficult. But in most cases, I think professional beggary is something that must be discouraged.
That's the end of the lineup of questions, Dr. Shehzad.
Okay, inshallah, we'll see each other tomorrow.